fate is not something that can easily be avoided. Often it is on the path to prevent one's destiny from happening that they inevitably meet it, and often at a terrible price. Some men will dodge responsibility entirely, while others will seek to cheat it. Then there are those that bind themselves to servitude, trading one master for another in the hopes their fate can be rewritten, not realizing it is this very act that seals their downfall. The God of War series is one that I do not believe needs an introduction, as it has been a staple of PlayStation gaming ever since the first game released back in 2005. Developed by Santa Monica Studio and released for the PlayStation 2, God of War became an instant classic that spawned a franchise that spans across 4 different console generations and numerous spin-off titles. The name of Kratos is a popular one in gaming, more recently from the beautiful stories of the Norse saga, but even back in the day, Kratos was a juggernaut of a character as he battled his way through Greek mythology, stemming from his original struggle to break free of his nightmares and claim vengeance over the god of war. Part of the game's appeal back then was just how far the game took the concept of the male power fantasy, pumping up the sex and violence to an insane degree. While on the surface, one might think that all the game is just a hyper-violent bloodbath about butchering everything that steps in your path, with a, frankly, obscene amount of nudity. The truth is that the game goes much deeper than that. The story of the first God of War game is rather simple, at least compared to future titles, but in that simplicity lies a uniqueness to the game. The story resembles the structure of a classic Greek tragedy as it focuses solely on the inevitable downfall of its hero. This downfall is a consequence of Kratos' own actions, and while the gods may have played a hand in it, the tragedy stems from Kratos' own flaws. Despite the game's age, it still holds up as a fun action-adventure game with a smooth and satisfying combat system, tricky puzzles, and platforming for the player to overcome, as well as a rich setting flavored using ancient Greek mythology. Of course, the game is still a product of its time, with some parts being overly difficult, some of the controls being a bit awkward to use, and an abundance of quick-time events that dominated this era of gaming. It's a game I had originally attempted to beat as a child, although I never made it past the first section due to the game's overall difficulty. It wasn't until high school that I would revisit this game and the trilogy as a whole, and eventually play through the Norse saga in university, which would cement this series as one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time. I intend to cover everything about the original God of War, including its mechanics, its story, and just a few of the influences that shaped it. If you haven't played the game for yourself, I recommend giving it a try, although I understand that not everyone has access to a PlayStation, and fewer pay the subscription to stream it over PlayStation Plus. Whether you played the game when it first released, enjoyed it after the Norse saga, or have never touched a game from the Greek saga, I invite you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy the story of the original God of War, where one man's therapy involves killing his former boss.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
Our story begins at its end, with a man left hopeless and broken by the weight of our tale. Casting himself off the highest peak in all of Greece, Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, would finally end his torment. After 10 long years of service, now only nightmares remain, and death would be his only escape from madness. To understand how it got to this point, we need only look back at the events that transpired just 3 weeks prior. Back then, Kratos was still the champion of Olympus, carrying out the bloody will of the gods, and it was on a ship traveling through the Aegean Sea towards Athens that he would find the path towards his ultimate destiny. The game immediately throws us into combat against the undead legions attacking the fleet, and teaches us the basics. The complexity of God of War's combat is built off of the back of the light attack and the heavy attack, and by chaining these two in different patterns, various combos are performed. Many of these combos are locked behind upgrading our weapons, the Blades of Chaos, but to start with, simply swinging our blades around will prove to be enough. There is also a dodge roll we can perform using the right analog stick, but compared to the movement of games nowadays, using the right stick feels very clunky and imprecise. Lastly, we can also perform various grab attacks whenever a nearby enemy displays a circle above their head, allowing us to either swing them around or give us access to a quick-time event to deal damage and receive bursts of either healing or magic. Heading down into the ship's hold, we can find what exactly it was that caused the ruin of this fleet, as emerging from the other side of the hallways one of the many heads of the fearsome Lernian Hydra. The Hydra will attempt to bash us around, teaching us about blocking as we wait for opportunities to strike. Once enough damage has been dealt to it, the Hydra's head will fall over, unlocking a cinematic quick-time event. These are performed with various button presses, movements with the analog stick, and occasionally rapid pressing of a specific button. Many of these events are rather quick and easy to mess up if the player is too slow, with some events later feeling almost impossible to time correctly. The movements with the stick feel especially hard to pull off, and the button spamming being rather punishing. Regardless, the head of the Hydra retreats, allowing us to carefully walk across the wooden beams to the other side. Walking across the wreckage of the fleet, one sailor closes the gate on himself, begging Kratos to stay away. He has heard of the stories of the ghost of Sparta, and would rather choose death than to be saved by such a monster. Leaving him to his fate, we continue to navigate the wreck, with vile harpies flying around and picking off the few sailors that remain that don't get hit in the crossfire of our weapon swings. The sailors, like the other civilians throughout the game, will provide health upon their deaths, making them rather useful to slaughter. Bursting its way through the deck, the Hydra returns for another round, swinging its head around and attempting to bite down on Kratos. It's not a particularly difficult mini-boss so long as the player can guard against its bites, and serves as a bit of a primer for the heads we'll encounter later throughout the level. Once it has been severely weakened, the head will retreat once more, allowing us to follow after it and swim through the waters to the next ship. We'll have to climb our way up the fallen nets and walk across more perilous beams, and once we drop down onto the far ship, the nearby sailors tell us that we are anything but safe.
It's you! The visions, they were real! The gods came to me, told me their champion would come and rescue us from the Hydra. But you're too late! We're pinned down! These creatures, they came from nowhere. The ships are all destroyed. All hope is lost, Spartan. Even for you.
What the sailors taking cover did not have, however, was Kratos' raw strength. With it, we're able to push along a large crate to not only block the arrows of the archers, but also give us a way up to slaughter them. Beyond the doorway, the screams of women can be heard, and following them to their source, the doors to the captain's quarters are sealed. While they were locked away originally for their own safety, the sinking of the fleet has now left them completely trapped. The key lies in the hands of the captain, who must still be somewhere amidst the chaos, and so climbing up to the top of one of the ship's masts, we can rappel onto another ship to begin our search. Within the hold of this ship, we are greeted by a vision of Poseidon, god of the seas, who has come to offer his aid. The Hydra has plagued his domain for far too long, and before he can aid in Kratos' quest to reach Athens, he asks the Spartan to slay the beast. While Kratos is already very strong, strength alone will not be enough for this challenge, and thus he grants Kratos the ability to channel Poseidon's rage. The various abilities granted by the gods throughout the game serve as its magic system, with this first skill unleashing lightning around us, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. It would also serve us to talk now about the game's upgrade system, even if it is a little rudimentary. Throughout the game, we can collect red orbs both from chests, the corpses of slain enemies, and achieving high combos in combat. It is these orbs that we can funnel into our myriad weapons and magical skills, both strengthening them as well as unlocking new combos and abilities to use with them. The nearby nets will take us up towards the top deck of the ship, where thankfully, the ship captain is still alive for the moment.
Get them away from the ship! Why won't they die?
It's the giant one! He keeps healing the others!
We'll never get out of here! Doomed! We're doomed! We're all... Silent! Save me!
The Hydra serves as the first true boss of the game, and it is one the player has already been primed for. The moveset is the same as the one fought earlier, and the first phase of the fight doesn't differ too much from that initial head. One key difference, however, is that the heads will now also have a breath ability to drag the player towards them, occasionally pulling them away from attacking the second head. Downing either head is a bit of a different matter, however. Once either head has been taken down, it will resurrect after a short while, as the primary head is constantly regenerating the smaller ones. In order to keep them down permanently, the player will need to jump up onto the nearby boxes and drop a spiked platform down on top of them. With the two dead, we can climb up to the crow's nest and challenge the primary head of the Hydra, which depending on your experience may either be a straightforward fight or an annoying slog to get through. The Hydra has three main attacks, which are well telegraphed by the way it moves its head. Its primary attack is to quickly bite down onto the side of the platform, with the direction coming from whichever way it leans its head. It recoils from the attack too fast to get more than one or two swings in, which is where the second attack comes in. After letting out a loud roar, the Hydra will bite down onto the front of the platform. Here, it lingers a bit longer, allowing the player to either perform a combo on it or release a blast of Poseidon's Rage, severely cutting down the beast's health. The final and most notorious attack is its roar, which will throw Kratos backwards, potentially knocking him completely off the platform. What makes the attack and the boss fight as a whole so divisive is the frequency with which the Hydra uses this move. It is possible to remain on the platform so long as the player is blocking, but it sometimes feels as though the boss likes to roar without end, leaving no opportunities to deal damage and constantly attempting to throw the player off the platform. The trick here is to try and consistently stay towards the front of the platform, baiting the forward bite attack. Standing on the sides of the platform is just as likely to trigger the side lunges as it is the roar, and standing at the back of the platform will only make the Hydra roar more frequently. The Lernian Hydra is a beast of Typhon and Echidna, the parents of many different monsters in Greek myth. Its breath was said to be venomous, and should one head get cut off, two more would grow back. It plagued the area surrounding Lake Lerna, until King Eurystheus sent Heracles to kill it as the second of his great labors. To disable the Hydra's regenerative properties, he would cauterize each neck as the head was severed, and would crush the primary head with a rock to put the monster down for good. Once the Hydra has reached low enough health, the player will be prompted to perform a quick time event to slam the beast's head into the central pillar, breaking it a bit more each time. That is, until Kratos is finally able to jump up onto the creature's head, skewering it onto the splintered post. The muffled screams inside the Hydra's throat lure us inside, and so climbing inside the creature's mouth, we work our way through the saliva-filled tunnel. Somehow, the ship captain is still alive and clinging to the slippery flesh, and when he sees Kratos standing above him, he thanks the gods that he has been saved. Unfortunately, Kratos has not come for the captain, and after taking the key from around his neck, Kratos drops the man to his death. It's a rather needless and senseless death, as even though the ship captain was a bit of a coward, locking the women within his quarters and fleeing from the Hydra, it would have cost nothing to simply let the man walk away. It's the first of a few questionable decisions made by Kratos, showcasing his disregard for those that stand in the way of his goals, a trait that would prove all too relevant to the Spartans' downfall. Returning to the captain's quarters, the key unlocks the door, allowing Kratos to head inside and rescue the innocents trapped within. When he finds them, however, the last of the women have been slaughtered by the Legionnaires, and in his blind rage, Kratos would cut them down just the same. Once the undead have been torn apart, however, the bodies of the women would haunt Kratos, reminding him of the past he desperately sought to escape. It was through the seas he attempted his escape, sailing from one land to the next in the service of the gods for nearly 10 years. Wine, women, bloodshed, Kratos indulged in them all, and yet they would not ease the nightmares that plagued his every moment.
Athena! 10 years, Athena. I have faithfully served the gods for 10 years. When will you relieve me of these nightmares?
We request one final task of you, Kratos. Your greatest challenge awaits in Athens, where even now my brother Ares lays siege as we speak. Athens is on the verge of destruction. It is the will of Ares my great city fall. Zeus has forbidden the gods from waging war on each other. That is why it must be you, Kratos. Only a mortal trained by a god has a chance at defeating Ares.
And if I am able to do this, to kill a god, then the visions, they will end?
Complete this final task, and the past that consumes you will be forgiven. Have faith, Kratos. The gods do not forget those who come to their aid.
Once Kratos has arrived in Athens, the last two women he had been sleeping with beckon him back to bed. He orders them to leave as they have now reached Athens, but should we choose, Kratos can take a brief moment to say his goodbyes. Heading out of the ship and onto the docks, more undead legionnaires await Kratos. Servants of Ares, the god of war, the undead army swept through the city of Athens, slaughtering the followers of Athena and any who would stand against them. And yet they would not fight alone, and in an attempt to climb over the walls, minotaurs would also throw themselves at Kratos. These bullmen are much more durable, but executing them with a grab yields valuable health orbs should one need a small boost. Making it within the outer walls, a few soldiers warn Kratos that the city is in danger of falling without further reinforcements, but those that are coming to help are cut off. The gates and the bridge leading into the city have been destroyed, and as two legionnaires come and kill the soldiers, an ogre climbs the nearby cliff to continue the fighting. The ogres are a much more durable enemy type, and the large spiked ball on their right arm is swung around in an attempt to hit Kratos, or launch towards him before retracting. Halfway through killing the ogre, a second one will climb up as well, making the challenge even more difficult. Still, the two of them fall before the blades of chaos, and heading into the nearby storeroom, the player is blocked by a simple platforming puzzle. It's easily solved by breaking a few crates, lowering others down to give the player a path to climb onto and jump across. If we poke around a little more, however, we can find another of the game's upgrade systems. Hidden throughout the game are Gorgon Eyes and Phoenix Feathers, which will increase the player's health and mana respectively. In order to get the bonus, however, the player will need to collect 6 of the respective items, with a total of 18 each to find. Once Kratos drops down into the adjoining room, he is greeted by yet another god. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, informs Kratos the gods are pleased with his progress, and yet the power she offers him will require a test to determine whether he is worthy.
Medusa, the queen of the Gorgons. Bring me her head, Kratos, and I will give you the ability to wield its power.
Medusa is technically the second of the game's bosses, but is closer to a mini-boss than anything else. If anything, she is a stronger version of the Gorgons encountered from this point on in the game, with increased damage and health to put up more of a fight. Throughout the fight, Medusa will swipe at Kratos with her serpentine body, moving in and out of range with each attack, but her primary weapon is her petrifying gaze. Medusa will attempt to freeze Kratos to stone by gazing at him, and should the player stand around too long in her vision, they will be petrified, leaving themselves wide open for Medusa to shatter them. The gaze lasts for quite a while, but so long as the player continually dodges, they can avoid the petrification. As for the myth, Medusa was one of the Gorgon sisters, accompanied by Uriel and Ctheno, although she was the only one of the three to be born mortal. She is classically depicted as a beautiful woman with writhing snakes for hair, and it is said her appearance was so hideous that all that looked upon her were turned to stone. Once she was a beautiful woman until Poseidon forced himself upon her within a temple of Athena. As punishment for defiling her sacred place, Athena cursed Medusa into her hideous form. Medusa would meet her end at the end of the blade when Perseus was sent to collect her head. Rather than looking directly at her, he would instead view her through the reflection of his shield, allowing his sword to strike true. Just like the myth, Medusa would be beheaded, but rather than by a quick, clean slice of a sword, Kratos would simply tear her head from her shoulders with his bare hands. Holding it in his hands, we're given the second magical ability of the game, allowing us to freeze enemies to stone. The gaze needs to be aimed and maintained for a period of time, but the reward for doing so is getting a brief window where the enemy is petrified. Should the player deal enough damage before they break free, the enemy will shatter to pieces, making more durable enemies like Minotaurs much easier to take out. Up a ladder from the storeroom is a ballista sitting in the middle of the hall, which can be pulled back and fired in order to blast open the path leading forward. Unfortunately, a stone door lies beyond the one made of wood, impassable for the moment, leading us to head out onto the balconies instead. There, the nearby vines provide a path to climb along the side of the building, and once the player has reached the far side, they are able to get in behind one of the large stone statues on either side of the entrance. Displaying his immense strength, Kratos would push over the statue, the head falling off and providing a way to reach the ladder on the other side of the courtyard. There, smaller versions of Medusa called Gorgons would ambush him, becoming a recurring enemy with abilities similar to that of the boss. The core difference, however, is that when these Gorgons are killed, they will drop blue orbs to replenish Kratos' magic, making them rather similar to the Minotaurs and their health orbs. Climbing to the top of the structure, another ballista would have a bolt connected to a rope, and firing it across the ground down below would provide Kratos with a way past the collapsed bridge and over the gates. The rope combat and climbing combat are very similar to one another, in that the player will be given the option of a quicker light attack and a slower heavy attack. The differences between the two come down to how fighting on a rope is one-dimensional, moving left and right, whereas climbing also allows the player to move vertically. Dropping down to the other side of the rope, the door leading in is sealed shut, although the banging on the other side speaks to the monsters hungry for bloodshed. Opening the stone door, however, returns us to the ballista from before, and with the path now clear, it can be used once again to blast open the wooden doors. A group of Minotaurs lay in wait just past the doors, and as soon as they are destroyed, the Minotaurs quickly engage Kratos in combat. Fighting through them and passing through onto the road leaving the fortress protecting the city, he would receive another vision, although this one would not be of his own mind. The Oracle of Athens would project herself to deliver a message to Kratos, and aid him in defeating Ares. For them to speak further, she invites him to find her temple towards the east, promising to show the way to attain the power to kill a god. The god we wish to slay is shown in all his glory as soon as we ascend the stairs and look out over the battlefield surrounding Athens. The titanic form of Ares is crushing the meager resistance of Athens' military, easily shrugging off the arrows fired at him from below. It's a sight Kratos knows all too well, and seeing the god once more, he reasserts his vow to kill the god of war for everything that happened on that fateful day nearly 10 years ago. We can look around a bit more from here as the path splits down two different ways. Down the right path, the road leading on is blocked by a large gate emblazoned with a sigil of the Oracle of Athens. It is she that controls these gates and of the treasures beyond, and to find her, we will need to head down the left path instead. Heading down the road, it becomes blocked by the fire of catapults collapsing a nearby building, and as Kratos heads into a building to find his way around the blockage, more catapult fire traps him inside. In order to escape, the player is confronted with a rather infuriating puzzle involving a pressure plate and 2 minotaurs. The goal here is to try and petrify one of the minotaurs using Medusa's gaze, but the timing is so tight on getting through the gate before it breaks free that more often than not the gate slams shut right in front of the player. Still, they would not impede the Spartan, and once through, he would emerge out onto the streets of Athens. As the citizens all flee from their homes and businesses, undead archers shoot them from atop buildings, gorgons turn them to stone, and countless legionnaires cut them down. All would need to be fought through should Kratos wish to reach the Temple of the Oracle, though few escape his slaughter. Unfortunately, the road leading further in has collapsed beneath the siege, and only by swinging across a few dangling ropes does Kratos make it across to the other side. Awaiting him on the other side would be a large set of stairs leading up towards the town square, but even here, the minions of Ares continue their massacre. Within the plaza, a horrid cyclops emerges carrying the lower jaw of some other monster, swinging it around like a club. Like the ogres, the cyclopses are incredibly bulky enemies, their size giving them some immunity to Medusa's gaze. This means the player will need to hack them apart piece by piece to help his civilians running all over the plaza. It makes targeting the Cyclops with a grab attack much more difficult, as 9 times out of 10, Kratos will instead grab onto one of the civilians and carve them open for health orbs. Even if the player kills the Cyclops rampaging around, 2 more will enter the arena to spike up the difficulty, and the resulting chaos will need to be managed quickly before the 2 hulking brutes overpower Kratos. We are now free to enter the nearby temple, but as we do, a woman flees around the corner of the hallway, telling us to stay back. We can continue to chase her throughout the temple, stepping over the bodies of slain soldiers as she runs away from us, until we chase her up a set of stairs. There, she claims to know who Kratos is and what he's done, condemning him as a monster. As Kratos tells her to stay put, she runs off down the hallway, and when he approaches, the woman continues to back up on the balcony. Unfortunately, she takes a step too far, ultimately falling off the ledge to her death down below. When we emerge onto the balcony to check around, we can jump over to the right side to find a trapdoor leading forwards, but it lies locked at the moment. The key lies on the corpse of the woman down below in the town square, and thus we are forced to jump down and collect it off her body. As we head through the temple to head back up to the balcony, Ares' minions now swarm us, bringing with them a rather annoying upgrade. Some legionnaires now carry shields that will repel any attacks we throw at them, meaning they need to be destroyed before we can carve them apart. This requires performing the Plume of Prometheus combo, and if we are standing too close to the shield bearers as we attempt to perform the combo, they will simply bash their shields against us and break our flow. Without their shields, however, they are just like any other legionnaire and fall all the same beneath our blades. The key does unlock the trapdoor atop the roofs of the plaza buildings, allowing us to rip the door up and venture deeper into the city. Where we emerge is part of the fortress crumbling apart beneath Ares' onslaught. The collapsing tunnel crushes a few of the escaping warriors, forcing us to take a slight detour across the rooftops of the city. In order to begin making our way across, we can climb some of the nearby vines, witnessing the fighting going on all around us. Ares is ever present in the background, carving his way through the streets of Athens and bringing destruction wherever he treads, and as we jump into a nearby building, we're greeted by another new type of enemy. The Shades are another annoying enemy type due to their ability to retreat into the ground as a shadow before launching themselves at Kratos, blades spinning all the while. So long as we can block the attacks for the duration, we will emerge unharmed, but their efforts will slow us down in our attempts to push forward. The path forward is blocked by a force field, and so before we can advance, we will need to deal with all the enemies present atop this section of the roof. Up top, this means contesting with more Shades and another 2 waves of ogres, all while Athens burns behind us. Their deaths allow us to properly move onward, the door leading to a bridge that is swiftly destroyed by more raining fire, necessitating an alternative path. Thankfully, the vines clinging to the pillars of the bridge can be climbed, but the archers on the nearby balconies threaten to shoot us down. Once on the other side, the path once again splits in two, and so we press onwards up the ladder in search of the exit. Climbing the ladder and emerging onto the upper rooftops, minotaurs and harpies slow our advance, but they would not prove to stop our progress entirely. Instead, it would be a simple soldier that would block our way forwards. Finding a lowered bridge on the far side of the rooftops, Kratos calls out to the soldier to let go of the lever and activate the bridge. However, the soldier, cowering from the rampaging monsters, refuses to allow Ares' minions to make their way across, where they will surely tear him apart. Returning to the split in the path, we hop over a section of collapsed walkway to find a ballista sitting on the balcony, and with our immense strength, push it into the nearby room. The ballista can be rotated and fired at the nearby door in order to open the path forward, where yet another god has chosen to offer his assistance. This time, as we approach the wall of light, it is Zeus himself, the king of the gods, that makes his presence known, complementing how Kratos has grown even stronger. Now he bestows the Zeus's Fury ability, granting Kratos the ability to hurl bolts of lightning with his bare hands, and unlocking one of the few ranged attacks throughout the entire game. With the lightning bolts in hand, Kratos makes his way back to the cowering soldier and skewers him, forcing him to release the lever and extend the bridge. The way forward now open to him, the Temple of the Oracle lies just beyond the twisting hallways and down a short elevator. Emerging out onto the bridge, however, provides an unfortunate sight.
Oracle!
Kratos! Praise Athena, you've arrived! No! Kratos! Kratos! Find me! You must find me! Athens depends on it!
The path up to the temple is littered with more legionnaires along the cliffs, but soon the Temple of the Oracle comes into view. Heading across the walkways, the Harpies are seen dragging the Oracle within the temple, with others flying out to tear Kratos apart limb from limb. Only once they lie in pieces and Kratos is able to enter the temple does he notice that someone else was nearby to witness the entire battle.
Good, my boy, good. Athena has chosen wisely. I knew it was so.
Who are you?
So, you have the blades, the skin as pale as the moon. You are the one indeed. Perhaps Athens will survive at that. But be careful. Don't want you dying before I'm done with this grave.
A grave? In the middle of a battle? Who will occupy it, old man?
You will, my son. Oh, I've got a lot of digging to do indeed. All will be revealed in good time. And when all appears to be lost, Kratos, I will be there to help.
This mysterious gravedigger is better left to his work alone, and as there are more important matters to attend to, Kratos makes his way into the temple. The main hall is swarming with Harpies as they enter through two large holes in the walls. The Harpies will continue to swarm so long as they are able, but luckily the two statues at the back of the room can be pushed around. Alternating between pushing the statues and slaying the Harpies, the two holes are sealed up, allowing Kratos to climb a set of stairs up to the rafters above. Carefully navigating his way across, the beams falling away as other parts of the temple collapse, this final pathway leads in the direction of the temple's inner sanctum, where the Oracle is held captive. Only once Kratos enters the sanctum do the Harpies release their prey, and as the Oracle falls, she catches onto a nearby dangling rope. While safe for the moment from falling, the Oracle cannot hold on forever, and so Kratos would need to find a way to reach her before she falls. Stacking the statues on top of each other, the path onto a nearby wall is opened, but with the Oracle losing the last of her strength, time becomes their greatest enemy. What follows is a timed challenge of climbing vines, swinging across ropes, and racing across the upper levels of the sanctum in order to save the Oracle. Thankfully, with only seconds before her strength gives out, Kratos would rescue the Oracle, setting himself on the path towards his downfall.
Kratos, as Athena herself has foretold. But you are late. perhaps too late to save Athens. Or is it Athens you have come to save?
No, I can't!
Once, Kratos had been a mighty Spartan general commanding an army of only 50 soldiers, but with every victory, their numbers grew. Their legions swelled to thousands of warriors, all bloodthirsty and battle-starved, and Kratos gave them an outlet for their fury. Brutal yet effective were his tactics, but only one did not fear him.
How much is enough, Kratos? When will it end?
When the glory of Sparta is known throughout the world.
The glory of Sparta. You did this for yourself.
Kratos would battle and butcher all he came across, feeding his thirst for conquest, but it was this hunger for domination that ultimately proved to be his undoing.
By the gods, why would Athena send one such as you?
Stay out of my head!
Choose your enemies wisely, Kratos. Your brute strength alone will not be enough to destroy Ares. Only one item in the world will allow you to defeat a god. Pandora's box, which lies far beyond the walls of Athens, hidden by the gods across the desert to the east. But be warned, Kratos. Many have gone in search of Pandora's box. None have returned.
The path leading out of the Temple of the Oracle brings us up to the nearby cliffside, charged with the destiny yet to come. Heading further up the cliffs, we are eventually greeted by a lone monument overlooking the cliffs, its purpose as of yet unclear. And yet as Kratos approaches the precipice looking out across the seas, there's an ominous feeling that washes over him, as though fate itself bound him to that ledge. Back down the path, a statue rises high above the waters, sword in hand stretching across the gap to the rocky ledge. Walking across the sword leads towards a hollow chamber leading down the statue. This spiral staircase leads down towards the sewers of Athens, providing a direct path back towards the overlook of the battlefields and a rather straightforward challenge. The sewers present themselves as a gauntlet of enemies with minotaurs and legionnaires trudging through the murky waters, and archers positioned on the upper ledges. At the far end lies a ladder leading up to a spiral staircase, the lever at the end opening the hidden path up to the overlook. By this time, Ares has already made his way into the city walls, the archers still attempting to shoot him down in a futile effort. If Ares should fall, it will not be by arrows and catapult fire, but by the power hidden within Pandora's box. The previously sealed gate now lies open, the Oracle's permission allowing us to pass through into the desert of lost souls. The raging sandstorm is seemingly impassable as Kratos heads through the short rocky canyon into the deserts beyond, but the goddess of wisdom would not leave him without at least some direction on where to go.
Kratos, the journey forward is perilous, but one you must complete if you are to have any hope of saving Athens.
The Oracle spoke of Pandora's box. Can it be real?
The box exists. It is the most powerful weapon a mortal can wield.
And with such a weapon, I could defeat Ares.
With the box, many things become possible, and so it is hidden well, far across the desert of lost souls. There is safe passage through the deadly sands, but only those who hear and follow the siren's song will discover it. You must find the sirens, Kratos. Only they can guide you to Kronos, the Titan.
A Titan lives?
Kronos is the last. Zeus has commanded him to wander the desert endlessly, the Temple of Pandora chained to his back, until the swirling sands rip the very flesh from his bones. Stay true to the song of the siren, Kratos. Your journey begins here. Pray it leads you back to Athens, with Pandora's box.
True to Athena's word, the song of the sirens do sing upon the storm when one is near, but the endless expanses of sand leave visibility poor and the howling of the storm makes it hard to hear clearly. Still, the three sirens sing their beautiful melodies, growing louder the closer we approach them, until at last they are trapped within our sight. The sirens are another rather annoying enemy simply due to the fact that they will nimbly dodge out of the way of most attacks, requiring the player to constantly maintain pressure against them until they slip up. Equally as useful is the use of magic, which they will be unable to escape from. While they will rather quickly escape from the clutches of Medusa's gaze, Poseidon's rage and Zeus's fury prove far more effective at silencing the enchanting women. The first siren near the entrance to the temple leading deeper into the desert sings by itself, whereas the remaining two prove to be a bit more troublesome, accompanied by twin minotaurs as guards. Once all three sirens have been slain, their souls unlocking the door leading onwards, we are able to press on in search of Kronos. This crumbling ruin, however, is unyielding, as down a set of stairs is a conveyor belt drawing all that land on it into a spinning wheel of spikes. In order to advance, the player will need to push a large boulder all the way to the other side of the belt in order to reach a high ledge, all while legionnaires slow them down and revert their progress. Once the trap has been cleared and the doors thrown open, we can progress into a room with two murals depicting the Temple of Pandora. From the first, we can see the architect, Pathos Verdes III, being commanded to build the temple by Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. The second illustrates the former king of the Titans having it chained to his back, the most powerful weapon known to men or gods housed inside. Just outside of this room, the sandstorm rages as a solid barrier, only parting by blowing into the nearby horn. On the other side of this canyon made of raging sand is a second horn used to summon Kronos, but this one would not be so easily used. The sands blow the horn away, all while horrific sirens emerge to serve as both test and guardian. They prove to be a worthwhile challenge, their elegant dodges dragging the fight on as they throw magic at Kratos, all while the pitiful form of Kronos is visible down below. Soon enough, the sands blow the horn back into place, allowing Kratos to summon the Titan. Kronos would emerge from the sands carrying the Temple of Pandora on his back. Many would enter seeking its treasures, and yet none would return. For 3 days and 3 nights, Kratos would climb the sides of the mountain. All the while his mind raged with the knowledge that he would either claim the prize he so desperately sought, or he would die within the temple, never to return to the realm of the living. At long last, the entrance to Pandora's temple lay ahead of Kratos, passing the old rickety wooden bridge. As he approached, a great pyre lay on a nearby cliff, burning the bodies of the dead from within the temple, and the gates leading forward would be sealed shut. Rather than simply giving up, Kratos would work his way around the front of the entrance, finding a path that would lead him up towards the tall ledge. There, the Body Burner, the first mortal to ever enter the temple and fail its challenges, works tirelessly to churn the corpses of the slain into new undead warriors to serve as the temple's many guardians.
So, you think you can conquer the Temple of the Gods, do you? It's never been done, you know. Sooner or later, the Harpies will bring what's left of you back for me to burn. The gods hid Pandora's box in here so no mortal would ever claim its power. And yet, year after year, I open the gate for more and more soldiers and place more and more bodies on these pyres. If I were you, I'd leave now. But I can see you are determined. Very well. May the gods grant you strength to conquer the perils that lay before you. Good luck, Spartan.
The right to enter, however, would not lie with reaching the body burner alone, as 2 more Cyclopses would guard the gates. These upgraded versions have much more health and deal increased damage, but it's probably the grab executions that are the most annoying parts about them. They have a more intricate quick-time event than their previous counterparts, and I don't know if it was just my game, but it felt like the final button press was glitched to never actually trigger, always failing no matter how fast one hit the button. Regardless, their deaths allow us to climb the stairs towards the main gates of the temple, and by turning the crank in front of the doors, they slide open. This is only temporary, however, as soon as Kratos wanders inside, they shut behind him. More shades would emerge, putting up a decent fight, but once the entryway has been cleared, we're given the opportunity to look around a bit. Most notably is the book placed on a pedestal in the center of the room, seemingly written by the late architect Pathos Verdes III. He details how this temple was constructed by the decree of Lord Zeus himself, and that only the bravest of heroes will emerge victorious. It is that lone warrior that will solve the deadly puzzles, survive the horrific dangers, and ultimately claim their prize of ultimate power. The power to slay a god. As Kratos steps away from the book, the door forward activates, opening the way to both destiny and damnation. Beyond the doorway lies the Rings of Pandora, which serve as the heart of the ancient temple. It is from here that we can find the paths leading to the 3 trials that must be overcome before we are allowed access to Pandora's box. Before we may partake of these challenges, however, a test of strength must first be passed. Running around the outer ring, we can eventually find another doorway leading to a hall full of spiked walls that continuously crush all caught between them. Just beyond is the Temple of the Crystal Eye, a few archers guarding the odd mechanism along the back wall, but hidden behind the 2 statues is a lever. Pulling it, the spiked walls cease their movements and a crank is lowered into the primary ring of the temple. At the moment, attempting to push the 2 statues together will prove useless, as although the 2 halves of the gem they hold will fire a beam when they meet together, they pull themselves apart not long after letting them go. Thus, our only option is to return to the ring and investigate the lowered crank. When spun, the entire outer ring of the temple rotates with it, and so using his great strength, Kratos spins the heart of the temple in search of the first challenge. There are actually 2 hallways that we can find by rotating the outer ring, the first of which is locked to us for the moment. At the end of this hallway is an intricate carving on a door depicting the great muses that inspired great arts and sciences. 2 of the 9 muses seem to be missing from the carving, however, lost elsewhere within the temple for us to find. Spinning the ring around further, another hallway can be opened with another wall of light indicating more gifts from the gods. This time, it is Artemis, goddess of the hunt, that approaches Kratos, informing him that the gods demand more of him. While he has mastered the Blades of Chaos, Artemis offers Kratos the very weapon she used to slay a Titan, the Blade of Artemis. It's another tool in the player's arsenal, and can be swapped back and forth with the Blades of Chaos. The Blade of Artemis has its own moveset as that of a 2-handed blade, although I personally found myself using the standard chain blades throughout the rest of the game. In the cavern beyond lies the challenge of Atlas, the first of the temple's 3 trials, which naturally starts with a gauntlet of enemies. Although the Legionnaires are rather standard to take out, the following wave full of Gorgons is considerably less so. Their multiple gazes can be difficult to dodge around, and if the player is not careful, it can lead to some rather unfortunate deaths. Once they are cleared away, there are multiple paths through this room, although the most obvious is a door on the right-hand side. On the other side of the hallway lies a room with a sealed door, the image of 2 warriors etched upon it. Notably, the 2 shields the warriors seem to be holding are missing, and it is these shields we will need to search for if we wish to proceed. The first one is rather simple to get, as it lies beyond a rotating wall. A cart full of stones from the previous hallway can be pushed back into this room, with a quick kick and roll backwards needed to get to the other side of the wall. In behind is a ladder leading to the ledges overhanging the room with the door, the shield of Zeus sitting in a chest across a beam. The second shield will take a bit more work, and the path to get to it is hidden in plain sight. From the room where the path branches, a collapsed section of stairs can actually be climbed, allowing us to access the partially collapsed upper floor. Navigating to the far side and pulling a lever, a rope will descend into the hole in the lower floor, where more undead soldiers lie in wait. These soldiers, once those that failed to conquer the temple, now serve as its defenders, their undeath spent forever in combat. Even as we climb across a rope, the undead are so thirsty for battle they even fight each other, until another challenger comes to face them. On the other side of this rope is the other key we are looking for, the Shield of Hades, but picking it up activates the trap, not only blocking off the way we came, but releasing a slowly moving spiked wall. The undead soldiers from before are now free to drop down and ambush us, their numbers ever increasing as the wall draws closer to crushing us. It's one of those moments in the game where the combat feels really good to play, especially when using the Blades of Chaos. Here, the game does not shy away from throwing an entire horde of enemies at the player, allowing them to mow them down as though swinging hot knives through butter. The combat in general is very fluid, but it's these moments that can really help to show it off. And seeing as the player is under a bit of time pressure, the game incentivizes them to cleave them all as rapidly as possible. The same can't be said for other time challenges later on, but we'll get to those later. It's once the last of these enemies falls that the path forward is open to us again, allowing us to climb back up the rope. Returning to the locked door and inserting the 2 shields, the door opens and leads us towards more traps. Where we arrive is a room full of moving saw blades and a few levers that open up a door, which we'll ignore for the moment. Instead, we move to the opposing doorway, finding another conveyor belt with spiked crushing walls. The belt makes it easier to pass through their deadly grip for the moment, and we head outside of the temple to climb along the craggy rocks. Our reward at the top of this climb is another time challenge, although this one is much less enjoyable. Rather than the previous standard undead, we now need to cleave through shield bearers and sirens, both of which are trickier to take out. Because the player needs to remove the shields before attacking and the sirens have a habit of dodging attacks, the timing on this challenge feels much tighter, with no real way of judging the hourglass. With the crushing wall, the player had a visual indicator of how much time was left as the arena slowly closed in. Here, however, the floor buckles and heaves before finally dropping the player into the fires below without any real warning. These 2 factors make the fight more infuriating, and even once the enemies are dead, Kratos will have precious few seconds left to claim his prize. The severed arm gripping an orb is the handle of Atlas, and only now are we ready to return to the room with the saws. Unfortunately for us, the conveyor belt now slows us down as we make our way back through the crushing walls, threatening to leave us trapped between them. The room with the saws can be a bit tricky, as the player will need to rush to pull the 2 levers that will unlock the way forward, and quickly dash through it before it can close. While the timing is already really tight, the moving saws increase the challenge, and at this point we can probably piece together what the challenge of Atlas is actually meant to be testing. While there are the standard enemy encounters, puzzles, and exploration, the recurring theme throughout this section of the temple is that it is testing the swiftness of those that enter it. Those that are too slow are crushed, sliced, or dropped into a raging inferno. These saws are the final test of speed, and once beyond the doorway, handle in hand, we can reach the final chamber. Inside, there is a large statue depicting the Titan, the boulder representing the world resting on the ground. On the far side is an old and broken set of doors, the hinges sealing it tight. The Titan Atlas sided with his brethren when the children of Kronos, the Olympian gods, rose up against them. The Titans would lose their great war, and each would receive their punishments. In the case of Atlas, he was condemned to hold up the sky atop his back, and is classically depicted as carrying the weight of the entire world. The handle of Atlas, when used on the crank in front of the statue, will cause it to lift the boulder up onto his shoulders, and pulling a lever up above will have it hurl the boulder down the hallway, breaking open the sealed gates. The light of the desert sun greets us through the doorway, as just outside is a lonely memorial. It is there that the eldest son of Pathos Verdes rests, as he perished during the temple's construction. Yet his death was seen to be in the service of his father and in the service of the gods, and so he was entombed in the structure he had helped to create. Yet it would be his resting place no longer. Pushing open the coffin, Kratos would rip off the head of the architect's son, and the coffin would move out of the way and reveal the path back into the temple underneath it. The path would be a long, twisting tunnel of carved stone, cobwebs littering the walls, and a distinct metallic scent in the air. It would only be when he turned the last corner that Kratos saw the broken bodies of those that sought to conquer the temple. Their deaths were far from natural, and the nature of their butchery was very familiar. Kratos had grown used to seeing the carnage of Ares' minions, as he had experienced it firsthand. The youngest and boldest captain in Sparta, Kratos commanded his army with unwavering resolve. Their constant victory made them arrogant, having never known defeat until the day they arrived. The barbarians of the east descended upon the Spartans with ruthless efficiency, their numbers seemingly endless. In the following hours of fighting, the barbarians showed no mercy, and the disciplined hearts of the Spartans were no match to their savage bloodlust. As his men fell in droves, Kratos himself faced the end of his life at the hands of the barbarian leader. Yet, to Kratos, victory would be worth any price, including his mortal soul.
Ares! Destroy my enemies, and my life is yours.
It would be that desperate call that sealed Kratos' fate, damning him for all of his days.
By the gods, what have I become?
The broken bodies of the explorers would be left behind, as lifting up the doorway just beyond, we find ourselves once more in the Temple of the Crystal Eye. The first challenge has been completed, and now we hold the key to the second. Down the hallway from this room is a skull-shaped door, the skull of the architect's son fitting neatly inside the hole atop it. Trapped inside, however, is a large rolling wheel that is crushing everything in its path, serving as the test leading to our next trial. Staying out of its path, we can circle around the ring to find a set of stairs leading to the water-filled center of the rings, and looking over at a ladder leading upwards. In order to reach it and conquer the first test of the challenge, the player will need to walk on top of the rolling wheel, riding it over to the ladder and pulling it down to the ground. Only then does the wheel fall down below, and we are free to make our way towards the challenge of Poseidon. Unfortunately, this challenge begins with the introduction of a new enemy, and one that is possibly the most annoying in the game. The Cerberus Hounds, to me at least, were the worst enemies in the game due to their unique mechanic to multiply themselves. Each hound starts as a small pup that will launch themselves towards Kratos repeatedly, throwing him off whatever combo he was performing. Once the pup has stuck around long enough, they will grow into their bulkier and more powerful adult forms. The Cerberus Hounds themselves would not be so bad as a regular enemy, being a rather tanky monster that spits fire and slashing with tooth and claw. However, they also have a habit of spitting out more Cerberus pups, which if not dealt with quickly will soon grow up as well. This initial encounter is even more frustrating, as the player begins with one adult Cerberus already in the arena and a seemingly endless wave of pups spawning around it. By the time these pups are dead, the player likely has already let 2 or 3 grow up, and the larger concentration of hounds leads to more pups being spat out. The player could try to focus down the adult hound first instead of the pups, but doing so means that they will frequently be interrupted by the pups who will quickly grow up. It is also at this point I want to mention the game has a built-in way to mock the player. If they die too often within a single encounter, the game will ask if they would like to turn down the difficulty. It is something that is especially hilarious when it comes to the puzzles, as the difficulty only affects enemy values in combat with no real differences to the exploration and puzzle solving. It's all rather amusing, as the game is directly calling the player a bitch that can't keep up with the difficulty, but surely, no self-respecting gamer would ever take that deal, right? Right? Beyond the Cerberus pups lie more Cyclopses and more Archers, all leading up to another little troll from the developers. To continue on to the next part of the challenge, the player must pass through a slowly rotating room. Every so often, the room will stop moving, the front gate opening up in front of a red orb's chest. However, it is a trap to catch those too greedy or too slow, as the gates will quickly close and spikes will impale the player. If one is swift enough, they potentially can grab each chest, but it is a bit of a nasty trap for those that aren't aware of it their first time around. Moving onwards, we're given another opportunity to scale the sides of the temple, now able to see Kronos crawling around through the sands down below. The resulting path leads back into the temple, where the first true test of this challenge awaits. Turning the corner, there is a long hallway up an inclined slope, still living soldiers hanging in cages from the ceiling. Running across to the other side of the hallway and checking what's inside, there is what appears to be some kind of furnace, and an inscription on the wall declaring Lord Poseidon demands us to sacrifice the ultimate. Sitting nearby is a handle for a lever, and heading back towards the cages, it becomes a lot clearer what we are meant to do here.
Oh, thank the gods you've come. Break these bombs. Get me out of here. What are you waiting for? Let me out. We can find our way back to Athens.
The gods demand sacrifice. From all of us.
Oh, please. No. No.
Pushing the man's cage down onto the incline below, the goal is to slowly push him all the way up towards the top. Letting go of him will send the man slowly sliding back towards the bottom, leaving the conveniently placed rocks as small checkpoints to deposit him. It wouldn't be a test if it were that simple, and so Legionnaire captains stall our advance, forcing us to occasionally stop pushing the man up the corridor and deal with them. It's slow and steady, with overconfidence sending the man back to the start, but soon enough Kratos drags him into the middle of the furnace, the arms reaching out. Only when the lever is pulled is the sacrifice complete, the man burning alive as we are offered the path forwards. Our reward for the man's sacrifice is entrance to a grand chamber, Poseidon's trident resting on an altar beneath a statue of the sea god. With this trident, Kratos is capable of breathing underwater, allowing him to dive down instead of swimming around the surface. Fittingly then, most of what remains of the challenge lies underwater, starting with a dive through a short tunnel. Laying just beyond are more of these fucking Cerberus pups, I swear to God, and once they are dead, we can pull a lever to open the way forward through the main chamber. Traveling back through the tunnel, we kill a very bad dog and climb the exposed bricks to dive into another underwater passage. Through this one, we're greeted by the ghostly sight of one of the Naiads, a daughter of Lord Poseidon himself. There are a few Naiads lurking around these waters, and it is said that men have drowned themselves attempting to claim their embrace. However, it is also said that they have been known to bestow their gifts upon those who please them. In this instance, pleasing them involves Kratos forcing himself upon them to steal a kiss, the reward for which are Gorgon eyes and phoenix feathers. Putting aside the questionable nature of these actions, Kratos can not only breathe underwater, but also somewhat dash through it. There is another test of speed as the player swims through a tunnel of saws and spikes closing in, only to be greeted by another gauntlet to unlock a lever. Using the lever to open a door and dashing back through the tunnel, we can head through the newly opened doorway to find another path leading down. Through this path, however, are swiftly moving spiked barriers that will pierce the player if they get caught, dragging them through the waters to their death. In order to get through the trap, the player will need to hide in the broken sections beneath and dash when they have a free opportunity. Finally escaping the tunnel and breathing air again, the player finds themselves in another grand hall, the nearby lever raising up a number of platforms up to a statue. The platforms will sink back down below the waters before too long, so we will have to make haste to the top. The statue turns out to be a depiction of Amphitrite, wife of Poseidon, and according to the notes etched in front of her, she holds the key to exiting the chamber. Seeing as she is pointing down, the player needs only to raise the platforms again and investigate underwater to find the hidden door. If the challenge of Atlas was testing a contender's speed, then the challenge of Poseidon was about testing their cunning. Many of the trials involve the player slowing themselves down and waiting for an opportunity, such as with the rotating room or the swiftly moving spikes. Other parts involve the player taking a moment to think things over, such as Amphitrite's chamber, or making sure not to rush oneself, such as the rolling wheel at the start. It even tests the player's patience to fight those fucking dogs. I swear to Christ I'm gonna— When the platforms are lowered again, the tunnel we find ourselves in leads back to the pool in the middle of the Temple of the Crystal Eye, leaving us to seek the final challenge. Before we move on, however, there are 2 treasures we can find in the Challenge of Poseidon. As we are scaling the side of the temple, as well as near the Naiads, we can find 2 muse keys to unlock the other door hidden in the outer ring. When the 2 keys are inserted into the door, the path opens to the Chamber of the Gods, providing gifts for those that have made it thus far. Each of the 3 fountains grants the player an upgrade to health, an upgrade to mana, and a great number of red orbs to upgrade our weapons and magic. With Poseidon's trident, we're now able to dive beneath the waters in the center of the temple, noting a few curiosities within. Not only is there another skull door in the chest of a statue of presumably Zeus, there is a door that can be opened and a crank to turn the center. For the moment, however, none of these are interactable due to the water, leaving us no choice but to explore the hole at the bottom. Through this tunnel lies a great hall with a sealed door and an odd mechanism atop a platform against the back wall. Activating the mechanism will fire a log towards the door, which proves to be rather ineffectual, meaning our next test lies elsewhere. It is through smashing a crumbling section of wall that we can find our 3rd and final trial, that being the Challenge of Hades. The central hall of this chamber is just as grand as Poseidon's, with a pool of blood at its center, lava and fire illuminating the room, and a doorway up a set of stairs bearing the visage of Hades. The hallway beyond, however, is far too dark for us to traverse, and so we will need to find a way to light it before we are allowed to advance. Our first test lies with a carving on the left side of the room where Hades demands blood sacrifices upon his altar. Once we accept his challenge, centaurs begin to emerge from the darkened hallway, triggering the trial. On opposite sides of the room are 2 blue circles, which serve as the altars upon which we will need to spill the blood of the centaurs. Each death within the circle lights up parts of the ring until they are fully lit with 4 kills each. The tricky part is ensuring the centaurs die within the circles. It is all too easy to accidentally push them out at the last minute or rely on a grab attack to finish them off, only to fling them out of the altar's radius. As for the new enemy type, they aren't too difficult to overcome, feeling decently bulky without being overly brutal. When the door opens, however, and we are allowed to press on, we will need to maneuver around a number of difficult traps to advance. They pose no real difficulty, only slowing us down from entering into a sort of twisting maze of corridors and enemies. Centaurs, legionnaires, and gorgons halt our path down every hall and around every corner, and it is worth the player's time to explore every path and stain the bricks with their blood. Should they fail to explore the maze to its fullest extent, their mistake will soon become apparent, as this maze serves as a much larger altar and it requires much more blood to satiate. It is only when the player finds a hallway with a crushing block that can be climbed that the truth of the trial is revealed, as every death illuminates the runes along the wall. Even still, some backtracking may be necessary, as there are actually 2 hidden areas the player will need to find. One involves pushing a wall until it falls into place, revealing a secret room, while another lies along the side of the moving block. Making sure to enter the room before the block lurches forward, smashing all caught in its path, the last of the blood offerings are satisfied and the path ahead opens back to the main chamber. Now at a higher vantage point, we can raise a statue up from the pool of blood, the next puzzle laid bare. The head of the statue moves, but similar to the statues in the Temple of the Crystal Eye, it will return to its previous position if we let go. Instead, we need to activate the lever at the base of the statue first, beneath the blood, and turn on the light from its mouth. This time when we move the head, it lights up the darkened corridor, revealing a long hallway full of doors, with large flaming boulders rolling down the tunnel. They aren't too difficult to dodge around, with the path to the opening on the far side being rather simple. However, the secret to passing this trial is anything but. The inscription within the room reveals that of the doors out in the hallway, 8 will lead to dead ends, with only one offering the way forward. Now, the rolling boulders offer much more of a hazard, as the player will need to time themselves to open up the various doors before the rocks can crush them. Most of these doors will yield a simple dead end, offering a moment of reprieve from the thunderous rolling through the corridor, until at last the player finds the correct door leading forward. Through this path is another gauntlet of enemies cleaving through minotaurs before being faced with a climb across a rope while being shot at by archers. The travel across the rope is made significantly easier if the player can find and kill the archers first, but that still leaves legionnaires to deal with as we cross. On the other side, we drop down into a circular arena full of minotaurs and centaurs, before climbing up a ladder towards another maze. Thankfully, there are no enemies in this one that need to be killed, only an exit to be found that leads towards one of the most difficult sections of the challenge. Ahead of us, far above the central chamber, lie a series of beams and rotating blades. In order to advance, the player will need to carefully walk across the beams while either staying ahead of the blades or jumping over them. What makes this so difficult, however, are the controls for walking across the beams. Throughout the entire game, these sections of platforming have been rather finicky, with rather careful movement required to prevent Kratos from falling off. Thankfully, the player can haul themselves back onto the beam should they start to fall, but this specific trial almost feels like a test of the player's ability to engage with this mechanic. Not only is the player rushed along by the spinning blades, they are at parts forced to jump over them, potentially knocking them off balance to fall to their death. Similarly, if the player is not careful and finds themselves having fallen off the beam and clinging to the edge, the player will be knocked down to their deaths, sending them all the way back to the start. The difficult part of the trial ends when we jump onto a spinning platform connected to a ladder, at the top of which are more beams to navigate but without the threat of the blades. Only once we reach the end and slide down a rope do we reach the exit, and by spinning a wheel nearby do we unlock the doors in the first chamber with something large beating away at them. As we make our way down, the platform beneath us partially breaks, creating a ladder back up if we wish to use it, and bringing us back to the start of the challenge. Heading through the broken section of wall and returning to the large chamber, we can now approach the doors and unleash the beast that waits for us on the other side. This armored behemoth is Pandora's guardian, serving as the true second boss of the game. It will attempt to slash and crush the player, occasionally breathing fire, and as we attack it, our weapons don't seem to be doing any real damage. Instead, the vents in the armor start to come undone, compressed air leaking out until finally the beast is staggered. After performing a brief quick-time event where we ride around on the beast's back and slam its head into the ground, the player is expected to rush their way over to the mechanism at the other end of the hall, firing a log at the Guardian to break its armor. This serves as the fight's first phase, with the armor around the health bar slowly cracking and crumbling away, until the player is given the opportunity to expose the skeletal minotaur beneath. From here it becomes a much more standard fight, chipping away at the boss's health bar until it finally staggers once more. Of the primary 3 bosses of the game, I would say that this one is probably the best, with the player being forced to peel away the beast's defenses slowly but surely. Optionally, the player is also able to fight Pandora's Guardian from atop the platform at the back of the room. There, the beast slams its fists against the platform and sprays fire the player will need to dodge around, and while it may prove easier to attack the beast while dodging its claws, it makes the journey to make the grab attack longer, likely missing the window of opportunity to trigger the QuickTime event to stun it. Once the beast has been stunned one last time, the player can activate the mechanism, allowing one more log to impale it against the door. In its death throes, the Guardian breaks a section of the door, allowing us to continue onwards and claim our prize from this trial. With the beast now dead, the full picture of Hades' challenge is laid bare, and it becomes clear it was a challenge of brutality. Both of the previous challenges involved some matter of slaughter along the way, but the challenge of Hades seemed almost fixated on it, pouring blood upon the twin altars before butchering the enemies within the maze. The brutality isn't just limited to what we can deal, but also what we can avoid with the Hall of Rolling Boulders, until finally resulting in the ultimate test of bloodshed by throwing Pandora's Guardian at us. Heading up another set of curving stairs, we find ourselves in front of yet another coffin, the inscription revealing the architect's wavering doubts. In this tomb lies the youngest son of Pathos Verdes, the construction of the temple now having destroyed his lineage. With the deaths of both of his children, the architect has begun to question his loyalty, as while he knows he should continue the temple's construction, the gods seem to demand ever more of him. Much like with the eldest son, we pull open the lid to the youngest's coffin and tear the skull from his corpse. With nothing else of interest here, we head back down the stairwell, to the room of the dead Pandora's Guardian, and one last god to aid our quest. This time, as Kratos approaches the wall of light, Hades is the one to greet him. The god of the dead commends him on the progress that Kratos has made thus far, and is willing to offer a gift of his own. The last magic ability we unlock in the game is the Army of Hades, summoning the souls of the damned to attack our enemies. They are especially useful at clearing out large waves of enemies, flying around and releasing their torment upon those that still live. Returning to the center of the temple, the skull of the youngest son can be inserted into the skull door, draining away the waters and revealing another crystal eye within the statue of Zeus. With the crank in the middle of the statue, it becomes clear what we're supposed to do here with each ring of Pandora rotated so that their doors align with one another. Now, once the statues are pushed together and the light from the crystal shines forth, it connects with the crystal in the heart of the temple, activating the mechanism. For the first time since its construction, a mortal has conquered all three challenges of Pandora's temple. An elevator is all that separates us from the upper reaches of the temple, and as we approach, the voice of Athena warns that once we ascend, we may only return with Pandora's box in hand. As he rose through the statue, Kratos would come to realize the temple not only lay as a monument to the gods of Olympus, but also the madness that plagued its architect. Upon reaching the top, the upper reaches would not be without its guardians, as we're introduced to the final new enemy type of the game. The satyrs are challenging opponents as they are as agile as they are lethal. They nimbly dodge around the swings of Kratos' blade, striking out to interrupt him with the same disciplined ferocity as the Spartan warrior. And yet they are just a sign of things to come, as Kratos had been in the service to the gods long enough to know a warning when he saw one. The harpy feasting on the bridge had been sent by Ares to remind Kratos of the pact he had made on that fateful day when he sold his soul to the god of war. When Kratos called out to Ares in front of the barbarian king, the god descended from Mount Olympus to answer. In the Spartan, he had seen the makings of a god made flesh and wished to mold it into the perfect weapon. All he required was a pledge of loyalty.
My life is yours, Ares. From this day, I shall carry forth your will.
With that vow, Ares unleashed the powers of a god upon the barbarians, savagely killing their entire army. The Spartan army would be spared, now serving Ares under his new champion. For Kratos, no simple weapons would befit the new champion for the god of war. Ares' will made flesh, and so he brought forth the foulest of weapons. The blades of chaos, forged within the depths of Hades, would be bound to Kratos' flesh for eternity. Once seared, they became a part of the Spartan's body as a permanent reminder of his servitude. In exchange for his oath, Kratos was gifted with ultimate power. Too late, however, Kratos would learn all power comes with a price. A price too high, even for him.
Wretched beast! I know who it is you serve! Return to your master! Tell the god of war I am his no longer. Tell him he is not safe while I walk the earth. I will find Pandora's box, and I will use it to see him tremble and fall before me.
Before we may claim Pandora's box, the Cliffs of Madness stand in our way. In the words of Pathos Verdes, these cliffs are a maze that may hold no true way out, asking the cruel and uncaring gods to show us the path through his grief-riddled design. Now his doubts are on full display, calling himself the once loyal subject of the gods. These cliffs are a maze of twisting pathways full of savage enemies and platforming puzzles, with the temple at the very peak housing the coveted Pandora's box. There is only one gate that denies us access to the pathway leading to that temple, the two keys hidden somewhere among the rocks. After navigating up the path and through a cave with two spinning platforms, we are greeted with the twin stone faces of Hera and Aphrodite, the goddesses of marriage and love. Both of them are missing a set of jeweled necklaces, leaving it up to us to find them. The first necklace can be found down below after rappelling down a rope and entering a small cave. In the back room of the cave, the necklace sits on a pedestal, a large gate locking it away. According to the nearby inscription, the architect's heart broke from his service to the gods, the puzzle here to piece it back together. With the varying shaped rocks around the room and the wheel in the center to turn them, the puzzle is a simple endeavor of pushing the stone blocks into place. Once the gate has been sealed up, the floor opens, the path to the necklace now open. Once we collect it, a ladder drops just outside of the cave, opening the path to unlocking the second. After bugging out a bit on the ladder, we navigate the side of the cliff by crawling across it, eventually finding a lever to lower a rope earlier on in the level. Backtracking to before the spinning platforms, the rope brings us up to possibly the most infuriating puzzle in the game. In a small canyon, we can pull a lever to gain access to a large stone block, tripping the timer before we're skewered by spikes. The goal is to push the rock around the corner in such a way to provide a boost up to a ledge where the second amulet lies, which would not be as much of a problem were it not for the timer. The timer for this challenge is extremely tight, leaving no room for errors or delay. More often than not, the player is skewered by the spikes breaking through the holes in the ground. Besides simply killing the player, this also destroys the block, meaning the player not only has to push the block, but also jump off of it onto the ledge before the time runs out. It's very narrow timing, but one we managed to get past, claiming the second amulet. With the two in hand, we can return to the stone faces of Hera and Aphrodite, placing their necklaces around their necks. Each necklace activates a set of moving platforms, and only when both begin to move does the path present itself to us. From here, the path to the summit is clear, but the memories Kratos fought so hard to erase would come flooding back to him. These memories were of the acts he committed in the name of Ares. The memories of bloodshed that robbed him of his humanity, leaving Kratos as little more than a beast thirsting for murder. Entire armies fell beneath his drive for conquest and the army that followed at his back. All who offered resistance were cut down, their corpses offerings to the god of war.
They've built this temple to offer prayers to Athena! This entire village stands as an affront to Lord Ares! Burn this village! Burn it to the ground!
Their rage was swift and without mercy, fueled by the god of war. Their brutality became feared throughout the world as their only thoughts were of conquest and slaughter. Kratos became near invincible, fearing nothing until at last he approached that humble temple. Something about it felt forbidden, his mind screaming at him to turn back and not to set one foot inside.
Beware, Kratos. The dangers in the temple are greater than you know.
Yet Kratos would not heed the warnings of the village oracle. He would break down the doors of the temple and resume the massacre, as all those who opposed Ares would be met only with death. As the haze finally lifted and Kratos looked upon the bodies of his final victims, the glory turned to horror. The image of them would be seared into his mind for all his days, and in that moment, Kratos knew he could no longer serve Ares. Instead, he would seek the god's death for this deepest betrayal.
Ares, you will die for what you did that night.
At the summit lies the architect's tomb, beyond which is the final resting place of Pandora's box, and the final test for those seeking it. Even entering the tomb presents a challenge, as beyond the moving platforms and saw blades, the door is sealed by 3 different gates. The first one on a timer is located at the entrance, presenting a test of speed. Without the other 2 gates open, however, this test will need to wait for the moment. Actually approaching the tomb on the other side, there are a few oddities placed around suggesting what we're supposed to do, as though testing our cunning to gain entrance. A statue in the back corner can be pushed around and a pressure plate nearby will unlock one of the gates. However, seeing as there is a section of cracked ground that can be broken open, there is more to the puzzle than it first appears. We're still missing a vital piece, and so investigating through a side entrance, we're assaulted by a number of Legionnaire captains guarding the way to another Cyclops and Cerberus pups. These monsters are mere distractions, however, as once they are dead, we can climb the ladder up to a crane attached to a large stone block, giving us the final piece of the puzzle. By lowering the stone block, we can break open the cracked ground, then bring the block over to sit on the pressure plate just outside the tomb. With the ground open, the statue can be pushed inside and placed on the second pressure plate. Then we need only run back to the first plate we found to start the timer, racing across to enter the tomb. Once we jump down from the crane, however, 2 more Cyclopses attack us, completing all 3 aspects of the temple's challenges. The race across the moving platforms tests our speed, as Atlas did, the puzzle to open the gates testing our cunning, as Poseidon did, and the fight against the Cyclops and the pups, along with these 2 Cyclopses, tests our brutality, as Hades did. With all 3 in mind, the challenge of entering the tomb is a trial that tests our ability to apply all 3 of the temple's themes at once, as only then will we be allowed the power the gods wish to hide away from the world. Once we have sped our way across the platforms, entering before the gate snaps shut behind us, we arrive at the final resting place of Pathos Verdes. 2 corpses lay within this room, his final note serving as a confession. The architect's wife had tried to stop him from finishing his construction of the temple, and in his madness, he was forced to kill her. The gods had chosen him to construct this monument, and now it has cost him everything, including his family. In one last moment of clarity, the architect would perish by his own hands, this hall becoming his tomb. In that way, the architect would serve as a mirror to Kratos, as both of them would act as the loyal servants of the gods, even as the Olympians stripped everything from them. Kratos served Ares for years before being pushed to commit his last sinful act. Only then would he break his vow and spend the following decade serving the other Olympians. All this in hopes of erasing the memories of what he had done during his time as the champion to the god of war. It becomes clear, however, that years of servitude have begun to heavily weigh upon Kratos, slowly losing his patience with the gods until Athena offered him this final quest. With the architect, it was the construction of Pandora's temple which slowly wore away at his sanity and killed his children. Each death served to further push Pathos Verdes to question his loyalty to the gods, until at last he wished to serve them no longer. With this final note, however, I'm led to believe they were either killed by the architect's own hands, or the gods had planned for the entire family to perish. 2 of the doors to advance through the temple required the skulls of the architect's 2 sons, and it is something I do not think a father would willingly build into his temple. What is more likely is that the gods commanded Pathos Verdes to construct these doors, and understanding what the 2 keys were that were needed to open the doors, he killed his 2 sons and placed their bodies within the temple's halls. Although the architect would meet his end by his own hands, his final victim would be his own wife, whose skull fits into the final skull door leading out the back of the tomb. Knowing all this, we can draw one more parallel, as the architect taking his own life for the sins he had committed would later be repeated by Kratos once our journey has come to its end. Sins all too similar to the Spartan's own. Beyond the tomb lies the last of the temples atop the summit. Making our way up the stairs and through the doorway, we're given a view of the box's final resting place, watched over by the statues of Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon. We are also given our last trial, although having come so far, we are not to be dissuaded from our goal. This last challenge is another gauntlet of enemies, these being archers and harpies above an ever-shifting floor. The belts below threaten to sweep us into the spinning wheels on either side of the room, crushing us should we fall. Once our opponents fall, we approach the chamber of Pandora's box, stopping to look at an ancient prophecy painted on the ground. Depicted is an image of Zeus fighting his final battle, a single mortal having risen up to challenge him. It is a depiction of events yet to come, but for the moment they do not further our mission. Instead, we enter the last chamber, pulling open the vault that houses Pandora's box, and our eyes are graced with its splendor. All that is left to do is claim our prize. As Kratos goes to touch it, a vision of Athena appears before him, congratulating him on being the first mortal to ever reach Pandora's box. With it, Kratos will have the power to kill Ares, and if he can make haste, he may be able to reach Athens while there is still time. The chamber begins to descend, traveling for a while before finally delivering both Kratos and the box to the entrance of the temple. It would take a while to drag the heavy box all the way back to Athens, where he would gain the power to kill the god of war. Unfortunately for Kratos, he would never get the chance to try.
So, little Spartan, you've recovered Zeus's precious box, but you will not live long enough to see it opened. I will see to that. Goodbye, Spartan. You will rot in the depths of Hades for all eternity.
As his blood spilled and his life faded, Kratos recalled that fateful night. Even as he died, the memories would not fade from his mind. One could not easily forget killing their own wife and daughter, their presence here orchestrated by Ares himself.
My wife, my child, how? They were left in Sparta.
You are becoming all I'd hoped you'd be, Kratos. Now, with your wife and child dead, nothing will hold you back. You'll become even stronger. You will become death itself.
As the temple burned down around him, along with the rest of the village, Kratos realized his true enemy was the god that had at one point saved his life.
Ares!
From this night forward, the mark of your terrible deed will be visible to all. The ashes of your wife and child will remain fastened to your skin, never to be removed.
With that curse, all would know the monster he had become. With the ashes of his dead family a permanent reminder on his skin, the ghost of Sparta was born. And now, in death, he had failed to claim his vengeance. The Harpies would carry Pandora's box off to Ares, while Kratos fell into the fiery pits of Hades. Far below, the river Styx beckoned Kratos and all the other poor souls who had been claimed by death. The waters would drag him to his eternal resting place, but as it stood, Kratos had no intention of resting. Vengeance was his to claim, even if he had to climb his way out of the underworld to take it.
Let go, fool! You won't drag me down to that cursed river!
There is a task left for me above. I will see it completed.
You again?
Deep into Hades, Kratos had fallen, and the pillars of flesh and bone his path to escape. Much of this section of the game relies on platforming, with the player slowly working their way up towards freedom. When we do find opposition to our escape, we find each enemy type has a horrid new form. Alight with flame, the undead soldiers, harpies, and minotaurs block our way, but they are far from the deadliest Hades has to offer. The first real challenge is wandering along spinning rods of sinewy meat, the blades attached to them providing impassable barriers the player will have to wait to spin before advancing. Some of these sections prove more difficult than others, feeling like the player has a much more thin area to walk along, or that the speed the rods are spinning make movement that much slower. Other sections have more conventional hazards, with archers on nearby platforms ready to knock the player off, along with harpies that buzz around our heads. Beyond that lies more moving platforms, these ones swaying back and forth over the sticks while archers attempt to knock us out of the air. Both of these sections, however, pale in comparison to the Towers of Hades. The two Towers of Hades are twin spinning towers the player must climb up, avoiding the spikes embedded in them. These towers are notoriously difficult to climb, as the player will need to very carefully time their movements unless they want to be sent falling all the way back down to the bottom. It's all too easy to accidentally find oneself knocking their head into the blades or trapping themselves between the narrow windows in between, leaving no safe path out. Climbing each tower is a rather slow endeavor due to the speed of the climbing as well as fighting against the tower's rotation. This punishes poor movement as, if the player so much as grazes any of the blades, they are sent all the way back down to the bottom. The second tower is especially brutal, being the longer of the two with a denser pattern of blades that create a sort of spinning maze. Eventually, we reach the top of these towers, where one last challenge awaits us before we reach the summit of the organic platforms. Infernal satyrs spawn continuously, their deaths each raising a series of platforms up to the exit. In total, 11 satyrs will need to be killed to open the way. Climbing up one more bridge made of spines, we're presented with the odd sight of a brick falling from up above, the rope attached providing us with our way to safety. As it turns out, our escape was not one performed by our efforts alone, as the climb is a gift from someone in the land of the living.
Ah, Kratos. And not a moment too soon. I only finished digging just a moment ago.
Who are you?
Now that is an interesting question. But for now, you must hurry. Athens needs you.
But how did you know I was...
Athena isn't the only god keeping watch on you, Spartan. Complete your task, Kratos, and the gods will forgive your sins.
Before we move on to the game's climax, there is one part of the narrative I would like to point out, as the beauty of it lies in its simplicity. The story of the first God of War is laid out like a classic Greek tragedy, down to the specific narrative elements and themes that were written in the plays and poems of old. Greek tragedies are laid out in a set of common story elements, 4 of which are needed to drive the story forwards. The first of these is the tragic hero, who is often represented as an especially exceptional figure. These are typically represented by mortal heroes and kings whose downfall comes with dire consequences for those around them. While their intentions may be noble, seeking to better the world or aid their fellow man, they are each and every one of them flawed in some way. No man is perfect, and these more complex characters contribute to the humanization of its tragic protagonist, ensuring the final message lands all the more. The second element is, more often than not, the style of conflict being presented. Across literature and media, all stories can be broadly categorized as a number of base conflict archetypes. These include concepts such as man versus man, or the classic protagonist versus antagonist, man versus environment, where the protagonist is struggling to survive amidst their surroundings, or even man versus self, where the protagonist is grappling with some sort of inner turmoil. In the case of Greek tragedies, this conflict is human will fighting against forces beyond their control. This force will often manifest as the protagonist struggling against the whims of the gods, or in other cases, against fate itself. These stories often bring up the concepts of whether the tragedy is the result of humanity's free will, or if they were predestined to happen. In most cases, the answer lies somewhere in between, as it is the actions of its characters that bring about the ruin of the story, the events that unfold only happening as they are the inevitable consequences of previous actions. These actions are brought about by the third element, known as hamartia. Hamartia is the element that sets the hero's downfall into motion and is not necessarily limited to any one concept. Instead, hamartia can be caused by a number of things, such as a character's lapse in judgment, a decision made due to incomplete knowledge, or a mistake due to the excess of some fatal flaw. Most often, this fatal flaw is hubris, often synonymous with excessive pride, but to the Greeks, the term referred to one who defied the will of the gods. Especially in Greek myth, the gods were not to be trifled with, their fury often inciting further punishments upon those who attempt to toy with them. While hamartia begins the story, the actions following the inciting incident happening as consequence, it all inevitably leads to the fourth and final element, that being the catastrophe. This is the final just punishment for the protagonist as a result of their own actions. The catastrophe is accompanied by 3 distinct pieces, each of which serve to deliver the message of the story. Peripetia is the reversal, where a perceived victory is revealed to be a horrible defeat. This leads into agnoresis, or the revelation, where the truth of the situation is unveiled to the protagonist, leaving them to suffer from its knowledge. As the story ends, the audience is left with a sense of catharsis, leaving them with a mix of emotions that will leave them thinking about the tale and the lessons that it taught. Catharsis itself is a release of intense emotions, bringing with it a sense of cleansing or purification, but the term originally referred to the psychological effect left on the audience after witnessing such a tragedy. The audience leaves the theater with a sense of pity for the hero of the tale and a sense of fear as, while the events may have been fictional, the lesson left behind is that these flaws are all a result of human nature, and as such, anyone can fall prey to them. Looking back through the story of God of War, each of these elements are present throughout the story. Kratos himself was once a great Spartan warrior who proved himself to be a competent leader, capable of leading his men to countless victories. Throughout his campaigns, Kratos never knew defeat, and as word of his exploits spread across the land, Kratos' pride would grow to an excessive degree. Kratos' fatal flaw, that excessive trait that inevitably led to his downfall, would be his pride. More specifically, it was the pride in having never known defeat, and his desire to achieve victory at any costs. As such, the oath to Ares was an inevitability. Had Kratos simply accepted defeat at the hands of the barbarian hordes, he would have been killed, yes, but he would not have known the years of suffering that followed. Unable to swallow his pride, however, he sold his soul to the god of war to achieve victory. Yet the victory he sought was never for his own glory. In each instance, Kratos fought on behalf of a higher power, and with each failure, the scope of that higher power grew. Initially, Kratos fought for the glory of Sparta, spreading the name of his great city far and wide. When he faced defeat at the hands of the barbarians, he swore the oath to Ares, his future conquest then earned in the god's name. When he suffered his last failure through killing his own family, Kratos then swore his allegiance to Olympus as a whole. He could have simply set off on his own, looking for a way to erase the memories across the world. Yet he instead chose to surrender himself to servitude once more. Not once in the story was there a point where Kratos sought victory for himself, meaning there is no point where Kratos is not a slave to authority. This is what Ares used to manipulate Kratos into butchering his own wife and child, and what the gods continue to use to have Kratos carry out their dirty work in the mortal realm. This desire for victory and willingness to serve is what allowed them to transform Kratos into a monster, and it is against that fate that serves as the game's core conflict. While on the surface, the game's conflict is between Kratos and Ares, with the Spartan attempting to find a method to kill the god of war. The real reason he is doing so is to reject that which he fears most. Kratos is rejecting his fate that he is a monster, and through the erasure of his memories, forgetting his family and years of service under Ares, perhaps he will be that monster no longer. Yet through his service to the gods, Kratos is perpetuating that identity. He is the butcher of monsters sent out to deal with whatever threats the gods deem necessary to exterminate at the time, which Kratos carries out with ruthless efficiency. In his quest to erase the blood on his hands, Kratos spills ever more. The story is also expressed through 2 distinct acts, with the past slowly being unveiled until the reason for Kratos' journey is finally unearthed, the great sin he had committed, and the events of the present which are a direct consequence of those actions. In that way, the slaying of his family serves as a sort of catastrophe for the first act of the story, complete with its own reversal and realizations. The reversal comes through the victory Kratos had sought to achieve over Athena, earning yet another success to his long and glorious reign as a champion to the god of war, only to learn Ares had placed his own family in the warpath. The realization then is just how much of his humanity he has lost and the monster he has become, which Kratos spends the second act attempting to rectify. This monster he has become may have been aided by Ares, but it was brought about by Kratos' own thirst for victory. This realization is not the greatest tragedy of the story. Indeed, there is yet one more reversal left to unveil, and a greater realization to drag Kratos into the depths of despair. Often the tragedy is preceded by a prologue to inform us of the events that led up to the start of the tale, but it is not always the case. Sometimes, the structure of the story is much closer to that of God of War by keeping its first act closer to its chest, such as the tragedy of Oedipus. In the tale of Oedipus, the king of Thebes, a terrible plague gripped the kingdom. At the behest of his people, Oedipus seeks the Oracle of Delphi for the cause, and is told that the plague is the result of a crime having gone unpunished. The previous king, Laius, was murdered and his killer was never found. Throughout the story, the truth of the past is slowly unveiled, with Oedipus's investigation uncovering the mystery until all is laid bare. Oedipus would receive a disturbing prophecy when he visited the Oracle of Delphi in his youth, as he was told that he would one day murder his father and sleep with his mother. Horrified, he never returned to his home in Corinth, instead seeking his destiny elsewhere. On the road, Oedipus encountered a traveler that attempted to drive him off the path, resulting in the two getting into an argument. In a fit of rage, Oedipus killed the traveler and carried on his way, thinking little else of the encounter. Along the road, he encountered the monstrous Sphinx that had plagued Thebes for some time now, killing all who failed to correctly answer its riddles. Oedipus would outsmart the beast, correctly answering its test, and ridding the city of the monster. For this act, he was elevated to the empty throne of Thebes as its new king, taking the widowed queen Jocasta as his bride. Soon enough, the plague would descend upon Thebes, and only then would Oedipus learn of what the old king had done. King Laius learned of a prophecy where he would be killed by his own son, and so he abandoned his newborn child to die in the hands of a shepherd. The shepherd, taking pity on the boy, left it in the care of a couple in Corinth. Years later, it was said the king was killed by a bandit on the road, leaving the throne empty until such a time that Oedipus succeeded him. When all is revealed, Jocasta would hang herself in her bedchambers, ashamed of having slept with her own son, and Oedipus would gouge out his eyes, begging for exile. This tragedy, much like that of God of War, slowly unveils the terrible secrets that happened long ago, which only now in the present reveal their consequences. In both cases, the flaw the heroes present is the sin of pride, leading to the deaths of their families and their lives in exile, as it was their defiance of fate that ultimately led them to fulfilling the destiny they sought to avoid. With Oedipus, it was killing his father and sleeping with his mother. For Kratos, it would becoming the monster he wished to escape through his service to the gods. Beyond these core elements, there are other classic traits of Greek tragedies present throughout the story, the most obvious of which is the concept of miasma. In the context of tragedies, a miasma is a stain upon oneself that serves as an indicator of past corruption. This arises through the breaking of sacred laws or the committing of heinous acts, including incest or killing one's own kin. One example would be the blindness of Oedipus after gouging out his own eyes, but with Kratos the miasma would be branded onto his very skin. The ash-white color of his skin, all that remains of his family, would serve as a warning to all others that gazed upon him of the great sin he had committed. Throughout the first few sections of the game, there are those that flee from Kratos or refuse his help, knowing of Kratos through reputation, and the miasma alerting those that see him that they are gazing upon the ghost of Sparta. Another common element was the deus ex machina, or the god in the machine, which derives its name from actors depicting gods being lowered onto the stage via mechanisms. In these instances, the god in the story would wave their hand and untangle the mess of the plot so it may continue, and Kratos would receive his own help from the gods of Olympus to solve an unsolvable problem. It was the gravedigger that would aid Kratos in his escape from Hades, as while the Spartan climbed to the top of the platforms, he had no true way to reach the world of the living beyond that. Much like the crane lowering the god onto the stage, the gravedigger would throw a rope for Kratos to climb up, solving the issue of escaping from death and allowing us to complete the final steps of our journey. Once again on the surface, we are conveniently in front of the Temple of the Oracle back in Athens, the work of Ares' minions clearly evident. They run rampant throughout the sacred hall, smashing all they come across and leaving the temple in burning ruins. The Oracle herself lies just past her chamber, bleeding out onto the stones beneath her. By this point, Kratos had crossed the Desert of Lost Souls, conquered the Trials of Pandora's temple, and escaped from the clutches of death itself. Now only one obstacle lay between him and silencing the visions forevermore.
Zeus! Do you see now what your son can do? You cast your favor on Athena, but her city lies in ruins before me. And now, even Pandora's box is mine! Would you have me use it against Olympus itself? Kratos, returned even from the underworld. Is this the best you can do, father? You send a broken mortal to defeat me, the god of war?
After thousands of years, Pandora's box was finally opened. The power of the gods unleashed.
You are still just a mortal. Every bit as weak as the day you begged me to save your life.
I am not the same man you found that day. The monster you've created has returned to kill you.
You have no idea what a true monster is, Kratos. Your final lesson is at hand.
What lies ahead is the final confrontation of the game, with the god of war himself. As a fight, Ares is a rather difficult opponent, attacking relentlessly and without mercy. He can summon a large hammer, both to swing it and breathe fire upon Kratos, as well as attempt to skewer Kratos with the appendages on his back. This skewering attack often comes in multiple bouts, occurring multiple times in a row before finally following up with a swing of the hammer. To gain a bit of distance, Ares is also capable of teleporting away before flying up into the air to rain down fire upon Kratos. It's a very straightforward fight in terms of mechanics, but where it succeeds is in spectacle. The player has grown to an enormous size, fighting Ares in the bay just in front of the city of Athens, all while the city burns on the side of the arena. The player can also see the pathway up the cliffs that was behind the Temple of the Oracle, the faded bluffs overlooking the fight, and the statue standing proud by the rocks. It's a neat set that keeps attention to the small details, but it stands to reason the final boss would not be quite so straightforward. In classical Greek mythology, Ares is one of the 12 Olympian gods and is the son of Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of the gods. While Ares holds the title of god of war, he actually shares it with his sister Athena, as the two represent different aspects of battle. Ares specifically represents brutality and bloodlust, whereas Athena represented battle strategy and tactics. He and his followers are often characterized by their savagery and militarism, being reviled by many of the other gods, yet when he appears in myth he is often humiliated in some way. An example of this would be the rather famous affair Ares had with Aphrodite, who was married to the forge god Hephaestus. It would be Helios, god of the sun, that would discover the two gods in bed with one another and inform Hephaestus. Enraged not only at the infidelity, but also at the fact it was happening in his own temple, Hephaestus forged a fine and invisible net. His trap was sprung the next time his wife and brother defiled his temple, but he would bring further shame upon the two. Hephaestus would invite the other Olympians to his temple to come and witness the pair. Trapped in their intimate embrace, Ares and Aphrodite were mocked ruthlessly by the other gods. So much so that when they were finally released, Ares fled to his birthplace of Thrace to avoid further ridicule. It was through Aphrodite that Ares had multiple children, including Phobos and Deimos, the fear and terror that accompany him into battle, Eros, the god of sexual love, Anteros, the god of requited love, and Harmonia, the goddess of harmony. Even then, it would seem Ares would not be satisfied, as he would cheat on Aphrodite numerous times with Eos, the goddess of the dawn, until Aphrodite eventually caught the two and cursed Eos. Looking at him as a whole, Ares is characterized by the traits often associated with the concept of toxic masculinity. He is arrogant, hot-headed, and lustful, leaving it no wonder why the Greeks often mocked him in their stories. Once Ares has been weakened and a quick-time event is performed to impale him on his own appendages, Ares would unleash his magic, sucking Kratos into some sort of pocket dimension. Within, Kratos would find the place where he made his greatest failure, the temple to Athena, and Ares would offer him a chance to right that wrong of the past. Inside, Kratos' wife and child would be waiting for him, alive once again and scared for their lives. Saving them, however, would prove to be a great challenge. All around, horrid versions of Kratos himself would crawl out of the walls and the floor, intent to repeat the familial slaughter. This part serves as a sort of second phase to Ares' fight, even though we do not confront Ares himself. Instead, we fight against the horde of dark reflections of ourselves, their attacks not focused on us, but on our family. While the player is tasked with destroying the horde, there is a secondary objective of also keeping our family alive, as they have their own health bar to worry about. If it gets too low, Kratos can take a moment to embrace his family, offering some of his own life up for them. These reflections don't wield the entire arsenal Kratos has accumulated to this point, as the vast majority will only be equipped with either the Blades of Chaos or with the Blade of Artemis. The sole exception is the lone reflection that spawns on the moving platform at the back of the arena, throwing lightning bolts of its own to shoot Kratos and his family from afar. This phase feels as though it amps up the presentation, with the building tearing itself away to unveil the raging cosmos all around us, the platform floating in the middle of an endless void. The main problem I have with it is that there's no real indicator to check the player's progress, as the fight only ends once they slaughter enough reflections. What that number is and how many are left is up to the player to guess, leaving this section just a bit too long. Once they are all dead, Kratos calls out in defiance to Ares that he will never again allow his family to die. All this was, however, was a way for Ares to further break Kratos' spirit. His family was already sacrificed in Kratos' pursuit of ultimate power, and nothing he does could possibly bring them back to him. Enraged that Kratos rejected him, Ares would tear the blades from Kratos' arms, stripping him of all the magic bestowed upon him by the gods. In front of Kratos' eyes, the tragedy would play out once more, the blades tearing into the bodies of his family. Back in the real world, his spirit broken, all that awaited Kratos would be death at the hands of Ares. That is, however, until he noticed the sword held up by the statue at the cliffs, the same one he crossed over earlier, like a gift from the gods themselves. He would not have his magic, nor would he have his cursed blades, but so long as he had the will to fight, Kratos would see his vengeance through. This final phase is a sort of tug-of-war between Kratos and Ares, and without the usual toolkit, the player is expected to very quickly learn the new moveset for this sword. All the while, Ares has a new moveset of his own, wielding a sword to clash against Kratos. He would utilize pillars that collapse into themselves and homing spirits of the damned to try and stop him, but it would not be enough. Rather than having a health bar for both Kratos and Ares, they are combined into one, with damage dealt on either side pulling the bar further in their direction. It contributes to the more cinematic feel of this phase, as though two warriors are battling to see who can dominate the other completely. Mechanically, it can feel a little awkward to use the sword, but as spectacle, it is easily the best fight of the entire game. The ultimate duel between the Ghost of Sparta and the God of War, and the battle lies in the favor of Ares. After all, the gods are above mortals in terms of raw power, their immortality ensuring they will recover from whatever blows any mortal could possibly inflict upon them. Ares burned Athens to the ground by simply walking through it and stands undefeated as the ultimate warrior. That is, however, until Kratos opened Pandora's box, toppling the God of War from his throne.
Remember, Kratos, it was I who saved you in your time of greatest need.
I haven't forgotten, Ares. I remember how you saved me.
That night, I was trying to make you a great warrior.
You succeeded.
With that, Kratos had performed that which was thought to have been impossible. For the first time, a mortal had slain a god. With this blasphemous act, the God of War was dead. In time, Athens would recover and thrive again, but the same was not true for Kratos. His years of service and the monumental task of killing Ares was all in an attempt to cleanse his soul of what he had done, and so he returned to the docks of Athens to receive his reward.
Athena, rid me of the memories that haunt me still.
You have done well, Kratos. Though we mourn the death of our brother, the gods are indebted to you. We promised your sins would be forgiven, and so they are. But we never promised to take away your nightmares. No man, no god could ever forget the terrible deeds you have done.
With that last cruel act of the gods, Kratos fell into despair. He would never be rid of these horrid visions that plagued him, and all of his struggles had been in vain. His final act would be to climb to the bluffs overlooking the Aegean Sea, and the site of his struggle against war.
Now there is no hope.
Death would not claim him, however, as the gods had other plans for Kratos. Lifted from the sea and returned to the top of the bluff, Athena would greet him once more.
You will not die this day, Kratos. The gods cannot allow one who has performed such service to perish by his own hand. Ares' tactics were brutal. His path of destruction had to be stopped. But now there is an empty throne in Olympus, and a new god of war is needed. Take these stairs, Kratos. They lead to your ultimate reward.
Gifted with the Blades of Athena as a replacement for the Blades of Chaos, Kratos would ascend to Mount Olympus. There, the golden halls beckoned him forward, and in the halls of war, his slain foes hung like trophies. The Liurnian Hydra, the guardian of Pandora, and even a statue of Ares welcomed him, and at the center of it all lay an empty throne. It was there Kratos began his reign, and from that point onward, whenever humanity rode out to war, for good or for evil, they did so under the watchful eyes of the new god of war. A mortal made divine. Yet, from atop Olympus, Kratos would face his greatest punishment. Immortality would leave him forever in the clutches of his nightmares, never to escape them. Now at last, we have arrived at the final piece of our tragedy, the catastrophe, and all that it brings. Before Kratos receives his final punishment, he has delivered the reversal and realization that would lead to him throwing himself into the Aegean Sea. The peripecia comes from Athena's own words, the victory turned to defeat. Despite Kratos performing an impossible task, he would not receive that which he sought. The memories would remain, and with it, the final revelation. Thus, the agnoresis is that no acts of service would ever wash away what Kratos had done. Some acts are too heinous to cleanse, and he would forever be forced to live with the fact that he was the monster Ares and the gods had turned him into. To Kratos, death seemed preferable to horror, but if Kratos' fate was to be a monster, then fate is not something easily avoided. The final catastrophe of the story comes with the Olympians offering Kratos a place among them. Upon being bestowed the title of God of War, Kratos was cursed with divine immortality, unable to end his own suffering, and forced to live with what he had become. Death would have been too easy an escape. Divine punishment dictated he lived knowing the full weight of his actions. One final element the story takes from Greek tragedies is that of dramatic irony, where a person's efforts to escape something only leads them down the path to causing it to happen. Often this is seen with prophecy, with one often meeting fate on the road to avoid it. And in the case of Kratos, this is clearly the case. Kratos butchered and spilled blood so that he would not become a monster, but by the end, this is exactly what he was. He committed the ultimate act of hubris by killing a god, a crime even worse than killing one's own family. The irony comes from Kratos' belief that the death of Ares would absolve him of his sins when it only deepened them. The gods then are shown to be just as manipulative as the old god of war, and their cruelty is on full display. To live with this knowledge, Kratos is forced to continue on, unable to die. And although he may stand among them as an Olympian, I have no doubt they will continue to make him into their pawn. This fate is ultimately foreshadowed by the miasma on Kratos' skin. The ashes of his wife and child were cursed to never be removed, and thus his sins are never to be washed away. For all his days, Kratos would be reminded of that terrible act, and of the consequences it inevitably led him towards. They would fuel the rage inside him at the world and at the gods. Grief and shame would turn to anger, and not only would this in turn spur on his followers to butcher in the name of Kratos, it would lead the god of war into becoming an even worse monster. He would go on to commit crimes worse than Ares ever dreamed of, and become the monster Ares molded him to be. War would bring the destruction of Greece and the death of Olympus. To the people that stuck around to the end, thank you very much for listening. I also have to thank my fiancée Taylor for giving me the motivation for finally starting to cover these games, because while it was one I had planned to get to eventually when I started making long-form videos, it was her playing the Greek saga for the first time last October that finally convinced me to start. I had a few difficulties with making this video, which you can probably hear in the background throughout, as our new kitten Izzy is a little ball of energy. Any bumps you may have heard throughout was her jumping and running around or eating our blinds, which if you've seen any of my live streams, you would know how much of a menace she is. Another thing I thought about is which game to cover next, as I didn't want to cover the games in the order they came out. With the exception of Ascension, the spin-offs are each referenced in the other games. I did end up with a bit of an emotional journey I was going to follow, with Ascension and Chains of Olympus building up the themes of becoming fed up with the gods, and Kratos' desires to break free leading into God of War 2, before Ghost of Sparta and God of War 3 becomes more focused on Kratos' family and the conflicts therein. The problem with that plan? The spin-offs, to me at least, don't really feel like God of War games in their tone, and their stories are a bit of a mess. They introduce too many plot holes into the canon, and the events of Ascension and Chains of Olympus, due to their natures as prequels, feel like they undermine the story of the first game. That said, I will be working on the autumn months of Persona 3 before returning to Greece to cover the next game, which gives me a bit of time to decide how I want to approach it. I may choose not to cover the spin-offs at all, or may just lump them into one video after covering the trilogy and go through their stories while also explaining why they don't really work, and perhaps what I would have done to fix them. I'll be putting up a poll after this video releases to get your guys' takes on it and what you want to see. Either way, I aim to have the Greek saga, Persona 3, and a few other videos brewing in the background finished by the end of the year. One of those videos will be Bloodborne once I hit 600 subscribers. So if you want to see that video, or like what you saw here, feel free to subscribe to the channel, because 2026 is only just beginning. I would also appreciate if you liked the video and left a comment letting me know your own opinions on the first God of War, because it often gets overshadowed by God of War 3, my favorite of the Greek saga and the Norse games. Going through the first game again though, it really did have a sort of magic to it that made it fun to play, and it has a uniqueness to it that the sequels just never could capture again. I've rambled on for a little long enough now though, so if you're new to the channel, check out some of my other videos. For you, and those of you that have stuck with me for the past while, this has been Lore Master Zarek, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.